Hello friends, welcome back to our Bible studies in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Today we will be focusing beginning at verse 11 to all the way to the end of the chapter, verse 21. As I said, Paul is very much engaged with the church at Corinth in trying to mentor them, disciple them, and in the process he has become vulnerable as he is involved. And somewhere he is emotionally hurt, emotionally somehow moved. Mentoring and discipleship is a very intimate process. It is a kind of a relationship where a person can become vulnerable. So Paul is talking at a very much personal level. He's telling them, that in some way their understanding of Paul is not right. Their perception of Paul is not right. When you're too much involved with a person, you're likely to get misunderstood. Probably they are considering him, some of them considering him as a burden. Some see him as someone Paul is trying to exploit the relationship, or some may be even accusing him that he is patronizing them. Some may be thinking that Paul is playing some kind of a trick or spiritually blackmailing him. So Paul goes on to explain that when it comes to being an apostle, he is no less than any other apostle. Because it seems like he is accused that he is not as super apostle as maybe Apollos. So Paul goes on to defend himself in verse 12. He says, "The things that mark an apostle, signs and wonders and miracles, were done among you with great perseverance. How were you inferior to other churches, except that I was never a burden to you? Forgive me this wrong." And he goes on to say again, verse 14, he says, "Now I am ready to visit you for the third time, and I will not be a burden." He uses all this terminology, being burden or being exploiting or in some way spiritually blackmailing him. It's a kind of perception that perhaps those who opposed Paul were doing some kind of propaganda against Paul. So Paul is defending. He goes on to say in verse 20, he says, "For I'm afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be. I fear that there may be quarreling, jealousy, outburst of anger, factions, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder." There is a possibility that in our relationship, there are a lot of, work of the power of darkness. The Satan can exploit that opportunity and spoil the relationship. He goes on to say in verse 21, he says, "I'm afraid that when I come again, my God will humble me before you, and I will be grieved over many who have sinned earlier and have not repented of the impurity, sexual sin, and debauchery in which they have indulged." On the one hand, Paul, as a parent, wants to make the young believers at the church in Corinth grow into maturity, protect them from their sinful life, and live a life of purity. On the other hand, he also sees that he plays a very careful role, that he does not in some way misunderstood, that people do not take him as someone who is trying to overstep in the relationship. That's what is mentoring. In mentoring, how far you can go closer, and how far you can come closer, and how much you should distance. It's a real tension that Paul is explaining here in this letter. May God bless you as you continue to enjoy the intimate relationship in fellowship. You may also remain sensitive to the areas where you may step on somebody's toes. May God help us to be careful on that and keep us humble, as Paul says, that God may humble me before you. That is the process through which one continues to grow in the Lord. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.